Hey folks, Dustin Siggins with Proven Media Solutions. Sorry for a technical snafu. I'd like to blame somebody else, but there's no one else to blame. But we are here. We are live with Andrea, and Leah. And what we're going to talk about here on Cracking the Comms Code is our third episode in a row on what's happening in the jobs market. 2 weeks ago, you can see the link in the comments. We talked from the perspective of the macro. Things might be tough, but the actual economy is looking good for communicators. We heard from two recruiters and an economist. Last week, there were three gentlemen who talked about their own unusual paths to creating their next move, not waiting for it to find them. And today, we have three women who have dedicated years to finding jobs for you. Two of them do it on their own, do it as a volunteering effort. None of them are recruiters. We want to make sure we say that a couple of times on the show today. None of them are recruiters. Their goal, their job is to help you find a job. Leah and Andrea both do this on a volunteer basis. Andrea does this with remote PR jobs. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick off with a couple of key questions, and then we're going to roll with it. So if you have any questions, any concerns as you hear things, any proactive questions you have, please bring them into the comments. And for now, Andrea, and Leah, I'd like you all to just kick off with how you got into this in the last few years and kind of create some differentiation among yourselves so that everyone's aware of the different focuses you have and how you find the jobs that you've been posting for years. And I don't care who goes first.
I'm happy to go first. My name is Andrea Holland. I am a PR professional by trade. Over the last 20 plus years, I've spent time in the agency world in-house. I've been a consultant for the last 12 years. And I started remoteprjobs.com about 8 years ago. It was when I started consulting. And the impetus was, I remember at the time, I was very lucky. A lot of my network came from Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and that's where I did almost a decade of agency work. So a lot of my work would come through word of mouth. However, as any freelancer or consultant knows, like sometimes it just doesn't come through. And sometimes you're like, oh gosh, where am I going to find the next gig? It's very hunt and kill. And so oftentimes, I would find myself like on the internet, literally Googling like remote public relations jobs. And more often than not, I was met with jobs that were more marketing focused. I was met with stuff that wasn't fully remote. I mean, remote work really wasn't a thing a decade ago, as much obviously as it is now. So, a lot of times I'd come up short. And I remember thinking there is a dedicated job board to most industries, but why isn't there one specifically for public relations? And I thought, is it that hard? Is it that hard? And so it kind of started off with a very simple, like I would go source, I would go find 10 to 15 jobs myself online through my Slack communities, through Facebook groups at the time, whatever it was. And I would send an email to friends. Every week I would send an email to fellow freelance friends and say, is this helpful? And of course they're like, yes, you're sending me work. Thank you. After a while, I turned it into a one-page opt-in just on a Squarespace page. And over the last 8 years, we've now turned it into an actual jobs database where I'm using a mix of APIs, AI, and then also human curation. And the jobs that we source for are everything under the communications umbrella. So that is everything from earned social media to content, analyst relations, investor relations, PR, communications. So everything within that umbrella within like all levels. All levels. You're right out of college or you've had 25 years of experiences. And the site also has a lot of courses, guides, and an article section. So that's kind of the impetus of my background and how it started for me and what we focus on. Leah, do you want to go
Andrea?
next? Yeah.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to. Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Rosenfeld. A very similar path to Andrea. I have been in the agency world for many, many years, mainly with consumer brands. My really path has been primarily agency. I have been in-house. And now for the past 3 years, I have been a consultant slash fractional slash freelancer over the past as I mentioned, three years. And really, the Leah's job list, which it is now called, it is going 3+ years of doing that, which is wild to me. It started off on a weekly basis, and I would just post. Then I found myself receiving a lot of very strong feedback at the time roughly, I was looking myself for a full time and then shifted to this consultant path. And I realized that the weekly cadence, especially with new clients and different partnerships, that was unsustainable for me. I shifted it a bit in terms of the curation list. I shifted it to a newsletter format where I could pack in much more roles and consistently include 75 plus viable new roles. And it has been a wonderful give back for me. I like to keep a pulse on what is happening in the landscape in addition to my real freelance partner work. So that's really a little bit about how it got started. And I do link a little bit on how I compile, but it is all manual. I have a process. I receive texts from my network and colleagues. I receive DMs from you all. I receive comments. I receive tags, in addition to kind of my quick list of what I've evolved over the past 3 years. Yes, I have tried AI and different tools on many different occasions, and it has, we do, as communicators, we should have a savvy in that space. And just the output was not up to my expectations. I will just say that. So, my processes each week, every other week, remain truly similar to how I started. A mix of, again, text and screenshots and things that I see on my own. So that's really a little bit of under the hood of how my lists are compiled. And ideally, they are really viable from humans. I would say is about 80%, 70 to 80% of my lists.
Leah, you're doing such an amazing job. I mean, I know your post started me, you're one of the people that inspired me to jump in. So my origin story dates back a little bit further though. So 2016, I left a job that was just toxic for me. The commute was toxic, the culture was toxic, it just wasn't a fit. And that search took me about 5 months, even in a good economy, because it fell over the holidays. And when I kind of jumped into my search in the January 2017, again, a very different market. But I was newer to the Bay Area, so I didn't have that deep local network. And I started to activate my network, which I was pretty good at keeping healthy and staying in touch. And I was surprised by people that helped me, and then people that maybe they were just busy. I mean, or people that didn't help me, and then people that went above and beyond, right? And I told myself at that moment that if I was ever in the situation that I could help, I was going to be a helper. I was going to be in that column of people that helped. And so fast forward to 2023, my company started going through some transformations like other companies. I had some peers that I really respected and admired that were laid off, right? And I wanted to help them. So I started helping behind the scenes and curating roles for them. And one of them was like, you should be doing this on LinkedIn. This is amazing. And so I did. I started there, and I started like Leah did. It was just a static, a long list of roles. And then I moved to articles because I wasn't quite sure that people were going to subscribe. And so I did articles for a while. And then just in the last couple of months, I made it an official newsletter that you can subscribe to. Like Leah, I'm looking for posts where people are sharing the jobs because that's a signal that they're looking at external candidates, because we all know what happens when you share a role on LinkedIn. You're going to get a lot of DMs. And then I've also been using AI tools to just follow the trends. And so it helps me make sense of the headlines. So my opening section is about like maybe a top story or two that caught my attention and trying to make sense of it for people that are thinking about what's next. So Dustin, thank you for having all three of us on, and I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah, me too, because we talked a lot about a lot of stuff in our email, and it was funny, everyone. We were emailing everyone. These three ladies were like, what are you going to ask? Can we really prep? And then in our prep call, I don't think I said anything for 13 minutes, which is the longest 13 minutes of my life because I'm very, shy. But one of the things that came across is something that, again, I've talked to the recruiters now 3 times on the show, September, January, and May. And one of the things that comes across is that employers are really particular. And Leah, if you don't mind, if you want to screen share your post from last week, one of the things that a lot of people, and I'm not as connected as everyone else on this call, to the wider network. It's only been the last 2 years that I've connected beyond 25 people I knew in the industry. But one thing, consistent thing I've heard is that a lot of communicators are feeling like they're doing everything and they're being put through 7 rounds of interviews and writing for free and other things that's been exhausting and grinding and demoralizing. So what I want to focus on next is kind of what you're all seeing in the marketplace, and I want to start with Leah because she had a post last week that was really strong and really powerful and very, I think, empowering for us to talk about on the employee side. And then I also want to talk from the employer side and how we can impress employers, especially before an interview. So Lee, if you can kick it off by screen sharing and just showing everybody the post that you did last week that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Let me know if you are seeing that okay. So this was a post I did, gosh, well, 6 days ago.
Yes. Yep.
And can you see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. And I it is not, my general sense and personality to put people on bash or companies on bash. That's just not how I am. But I truly got triggered as here. I was making breakfast with my two children and mixing up chocolate milk, and I saw this post from a leader saying, we are still looking for this role. And I had scrolled down a little bit further, and that same post was something that they did 2.5 months before. So mind you, I just paused a little bit. I've been at this for now, these job creations for over 3 years. So I do have a little bit of spidey senses. Again, some is validated, some is not, right? Things just make my skin crawl. And because I'm also hearing it from the job search end, right? I'm seeing these stories. Y'all are reaching out to me and sharing your story. So, I want to advocate. I'll go back to why I posted this. Essentially, this leader, it was not a C-suite, but it was a very high ranking individual. And for someone to share, they have not found a candidate in one of the top 3 markets in the country with so much talent out there. I just kind of, again, I got saucy, I got spicy, and I posted it. And, happy to share, I have there was 596 impressions, lots of comments, again, open book, happy to share. It resonated. And I do think there's a couple layers here, and certainly want to hear what my other speakers think about this too, is, I'm following, a lot of candidates have paused to share their frustrations, right? It could reflect poorly or give some poor optics in their next opportunity or their next role. I have the luxury. I'm able to post these types of things. Hopefully, I've earned some trust over the past 3 years that when these things get me all, flustered, it's coming from a good place, a sound place, a place based on data and insight. And I want to advocate. It is frustrating to me, again, that this leader, with all these layoffs, with all these, top talent that we're seeing, you could not find someone in 2.5 months. Is just, again, my patience is thin. My patience is waning because I see it from the other side. So I'm going to pause there and stop talking, and, feel free to go through some of the wonderful comments. But I do think it resonated with a lot of folks.
I'd like to chime in here really quick as well, because I saw that post as well, Leah, and it definitely resonated. One thing that I think is also really interesting, I said on the call earlier, this reminds me of dating apps right now. It's like, oh, the unicorn, like that's exactly what it reminded me of. I think there's also a lot of like open recs out there of companies, and I think this is an age-old problem of like that they don't necessarily know what they need, right? And so you're just throwing the kitchen sink at this actual job description, being like, I need someone to hit all the boxes when you actually in reality don't necessarily know what you need. And I noticed this very early on when I was sourcing roles manually for remoteprjobs.com, where I read these recs and I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. And so there ends up being a lot of education around like this is actually what you need right now. So I feel like a lot of companies are throwing out the kitchen sink of doing a search on like what is PR? This is what I need. And it's like, no, not every single person is going to be able to check that box, but also is that actually what you need as well? So that's something that's frustrating to me when I see companies posting this and that I've done a lot of education with clients on is what exactly is your end goal here? Because this is what it takes to get there. And this is actually the type of person that you need for that. And one other thing I was going to note that I'm seeing a lot in actual job descriptions, which I love because I think this is really important. And I think if you see this in a job description, this is like such a green flag, is the companies that are like, I want someone that understands, that has like AI fluency. Like they understand the impact of GEO. They understand that earned media is the end goal for them showing up in these AI searches right now. Because if you have a company or an employer that understands that, then you automatically know they're going to value what you're doing. So tying into a little bit of what Leah said, I think it's like an understanding issue of like, what do I need? And then for me, that's a signal, a green flag of a company that like, okay, I would be interested in working with them and playing up those skills because they understand the craft of what I do and the impact that it has.
And Andrea, in our prep call, you mentioned something that's related to this, which was that people need to use their network. And this is something that Jessica and Brooke strongly encouraged 2 weeks ago. And it's something that I've noticed. My sample size is very small, but I want to pivot to you, Andrea,
Yeah.
because what I've noticed is that in the last year, I've probably asked 10 people who are looking for work, do you have 10 people in your network who know your skills, they know and trust you, they know they have a problem that you can solve, and they have budget to pay? The people who work in agencies say yes. The people who are in-house often say no. And I think it's because a lot of in-house people focus so much on serving within their silo, if you will, silo being the company in this case. They don't have as many organic connections they've gathered in their career. And the second question I asked is, do you have 30 people who over the next 6 months you could reopen connections with? So we've gained clients of people I haven't talked to in a decade. We happen to reconnect on LinkedIn, and then within a few months we have a relationship, a financial relationship. And again, I hear the word no from people in-house. So I want to pivot to you, Andrea, because you talked about the relationship building and the network building, both that you did, but also in our prep call, that you think is really important. And I'd like you to also focus on how that can help get past some of these aggravating ghosting and some other things that Leah talked about.
I mean, not to sound so cliche, your network is your net worth. It's everything. It's really everything. I would say in the last 12 years of consulting, I have maybe done 3 cold RFPs, maybe. Like everything has come through word of mouth. Everything has come through my network. Everything has come through a former client who referred me. Everything has come through, a former colleague, anything like that. So that's number one. I do agree with that. And the second part of the question specifically was, forgive me.
Well, and I apologize. I actually meant Andrea D.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's my intro.
So
Take it on
I
out.
apologize.
I told you on the prep call that
I thought I said
two
it. I said
people with the
Andrea.
same
Didn't I
first
say
name was
Andrea?
going to be challenging. No,
I'm
You
just
can
gonna
say our
use
last
last
name.
initials going forward. I'm
that's
just gonna use
okay.
last initials.
Well, there's my 2 cents. So hand it off.
No, they were
Yeah,
valuable
I-
cents.
yeah, and so I agree with what Andrea just said. I think you're touching on something though that is core to never search alone, that methodology. I have quite a few
Yes.
friends that have gone through that. So first, that methodology starts with getting really super clear on like what you're good at and what you're
Mhm.
looking for, right?
Yep.
And what the market is willing to pay for, right? And then the next step is, from what my friends have been telling me, is then you
Yep.
activate your network, not just your really strong connections, but even those weaker ones. And being
Mhm.
able to articulate that is super important. And then last, I'll make a comment on the unicorn phenomenon that we were referring to, these kitchen sink postings. And I live with a recruiter. He recruits for a different industry, so don't be reaching out or anything, but he refers to it as the purple squirrel, is like how he likes to refer to it, versus the unicorn. But what I am hearing from people that are finding jobs and through their network, a lot of times the person doesn't know what they want, right? They have the open rec, they have the approval for the head count. And sometimes if your outreach happens at the right time, you can actually help them shape that job description, right?
Mhm.
And then they're opening the rec with someone with your skill set in mind. And I've seen several people land their next role kind of luck, circumstance, timing, but really activating the network and getting those conversations before the job even gets posted. So I definitely think you're onto something there, Dustin, about the importance of networks.
And how do you recommend using the three of you? Because I have my own recommendations and I'll share those in a few minutes, but how do you all recommend that people stand out in the marketplace? Given that there is this glut and there has been for 3 years of people looking, what are the ways that you think people can stand out before? We've just talked about making sure that your network is strong. And I want to encourage everybody. We got $20,000 in business and a referral that led to $120,000 in business in 2022 from a crappy little, pardon my language, little LinkedIn post that I put up because I thought at the time that LinkedIn was a billboard. I didn't know how to use LinkedIn at the time. Someone liked it. I shot him a note. We literally worked together for a week 10 years earlier. Reconnected. Within 6 weeks, he threw business at us, and then through through a referral at us led to $120,000 in business. That was because I was proactive and I recognized the opportunity. And so I do want to make sure that we dial into the network. That network doesn't have to be someone you talked to last week or last month. It can be someone from a long time ago. So I think that's really important. But then also, what are the other ways that you recommend people try to stand out before the interview, especially on LinkedIn?
I can speak to this. I think it ties into exactly what you said. What I'm seeing a lot more is people that are not waiting for a posting, they're building visibility for themselves and getting referred before a role is even listed. I mean, you're seeing it more and more just with, building a following on LinkedIn. And I know, how do I say this? I feel like it just has to be something that is done authentically and people can see right through that. But if you're on LinkedIn and you're talking about like anything industry related, and then I think also niching down is always the best thing. I mean, for example, like if you're like, I work predominantly with fintech startups, right? And so if I'm going to get on there and talk about like client related things, it's going to be about the fintech industry. It's going to be about a client case study. It's going to be about something along those lines. So it's building your credibility and your own authority along the way. It's not much different than what we as PR professionals do for executives and beating the thought leadership platforms, right? It's like
Exactly.
pick your lane, like double down and show that you're an authority in it. Because I'll be honest, even like when I'm hiring, like what is the first thing I do? I go to their LinkedIn. It's like, what's going on here? Where have you worked? What are your opinions on things? What kind of metrics and like success have you seen? That kind of thing. So I think really having a clear, specific point of view, what you do, why you do it, and being as specific as possible is really helping a lot of people right now.
Yeah, right. Leah?
Jump in. I mean, we are all LinkedIn fangirls. I think that's fair to say over here. So I do think, LinkedIn is just a critical piece of the job search process, making sure it's updated, it's fresh. Start small. If you're not comfortable posting something, start, just commenting, and build up that muscle. It took, just personally speaking, it took me probably over a year to feel comfortable, one, speaking about myself, and two, sharing more of my stories. I'm used to, nearly 20 plus years. I'm shaping stories for others, for clients, for brands, for new products, what have you. It does take a little bit of different muscle to turn it around on yourself. And I do think that many communicators and PR professionals would agree too. It's a little bit different when you flip the coin. Start small there. And I will say, how you're standing out, you have a finite amount of time to show your value and what's different about you. Practice those quick quips verbally. When I started figuring out my path, I did a deck about myself and like my storyline. It was very awkward. Trust me, it was very awkward, but it was from a former colleague, a well-known leader, and it helped her. It helped shape her narrative a little bit more. And she shared that inspiration with me. I ran it for myself. No one's ever seen it, but it was
Right.
very helpful in shaping what you're looking for. And I will say, a little bit different than Andrea H. There are, for me, it's a little bit more of a portfolio look. For me, I am not just one thing. I've worked in integrated communications, and sure, there are things that I might be a little bit more have a little bit more expertise or experience with. Yes, but I can still do a handful of different arms and branches, if you will, within this communication space. So it is not overwhelming a potential partner or a client. It's really playing up, and not in an icky way, and proving I've done this and this and this. These are the types of places and experience and receipts I have shown over the years. And for me, that more of a portfolio look, I don't think I would change it for just one thing. And that's just for me.
And I'm going to share Andrea or Andrea D. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I agree with the points made by both Leah and Andrea. Like, I do think you need to be mindful of, if you were to apply for a job and someone were to look you up on LinkedIn, like, what is conveyed in the first 30 seconds of looking in your profile? Like, do they have confidence that you're a human being, right? With a good headshot? Does your headline and about statement match the resume they just received, right? Or at least seem like it's the same person? And are you engaging at all on LinkedIn? I mean, that also shows, it gets factored into how you show up to recruiters too, that are searching on, keywords or for looking for candidates. There's some factor that the algorithm picks up if you are a real, like, actively engaged on. I don't exactly know how it's calculated, but I know it's factored in. So
No, it is factored in. And to the point about relationship building, again, I want to just share a little bit, because most of the people watching probably don't know even who I am. They're here because of the three of you. 2.5 years ago, I had 3,300 LinkedIn connections. I think I had 30 connections in the industry. And I looked at my business model and realized we were making a whole lot more money in the comms industry than we were anywhere else. So we shifted a whole business model. And I've since added about 5,500 connections in the communications industry. I post 6 days a week. I schedule my posts. I engage on probably 15 people's content every day. And my stuff doesn't go viral. The biggest post, the biggest number of impressions I've had isn't even close to what Leah, I'm going to share that post in just a moment, isn't even close to what Leah had for her post. But here's the thing. When I met Andrea H., a month ago? What was the very first thing you said in your message to me, Andrea? It was, Justin, I'm so glad we connected. I've been seeing your stuff for months.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy who runs a 10-person company. I have no idea if my stuff stands out. I just know I post it, and my business grew 75% last year through LinkedIn. We're on track for 50% this year. I'm not talking about AI. I'm not talking about anything fancy. I am dialing into where I think there are holes in the marketplace and sharing them in a way that isn't just, here's a thing, but driving people down the journey of what it's like to work with me and the way my brain works and the way my brain functions. So I'm going to share my screen and just show people just a few examples. And the examples I'm going to share, you can actually see some other examples next week. On the 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to actually be having a show with the person who taught me how to use LinkedIn, Molly Johnson, and 2 other people. We're going to have a show on how PR people can come out of the shadows in 2026 on LinkedIn. So things that we're talking about right now, we're going to spend an hour on next week. And what I want to do here is just share my screen, because these are 3 very different kind of posts that I'm going to show you. But this first post was something that I thought was a little unusual. I picked up the phone and called an op-ed editor, right? I let it, kind of an interesting hook. And then I shared the story. I shared the process. I showed people what I did. And then I closed with an interesting takeaway, right? And this one didn't do great, but this is the kind of content I'm posting. And the next one had a kind of a cool image. Everyone knows this image of working at 10 p.m. And I laid out, this was actually a direct sales pitch. Here's how to think about how to hire the right PR agency. And then here's a client story. This allows me to say, look, I can give you 6 tips. And then if someone keeps reading, they can see what it is like to work with us. And then up here, this was the one that did, almost as well as Leah's, was kind of personal. I have 5 daughters, create an AI image, and talked to kind of personally about a job offer and how things have been up and down for the company. But all of these give insights into what we do as a company, and what it's like to work with us. So when people are often, what I hear from a lot of people is, I don't know what to post, or I don't know how to post, or I don't know how to differentiate myself. Treat yourself like a client, as everyone has said. What is something you're seeing as a whole in the marketplace, especially to the people you want to get hired by? Target those people specifically. Post. But don't forget to what Andrea D said, engage on people's stuff every day. 10 to 15 people. It gins up the algorithm, but more importantly, the people you're targeting are going to see you as a communicator, as a connector, rather. And that's most of what people see. My stuff doesn't get the greatest engagement, but people tell me they think there must be 3 of me on LinkedIn, because every single morning I'm engaging on 15 people's content and trying to add value and challenge people and ask questions. So I'll get off my step stool here, but I just want to share that's the strategy. You don't need huge engagement. You need engagement from the right people.
I couldn't agree more. One thing I'm a LinkedIn Learning author. So if you go on the platform, I have actual PR courses for PR professionals and entrepreneurs and stuff like that.
Yep.
However, sometimes they give you kind of hacks and tricks along the way. And one of the things they always say is engage and comment with other people's content, because that expands your reach. And I couldn't agree. It doesn't matter if you have 20,000 followers or 40,000 followers. You could have 0 engagement from that. It's really about what we always say when we're doing our craft, who is your ICP? Who is your core audience? That is the only person you should be talking to. Yep. I know influencers that make, $5,000 a year and they have 50,000 followers. And I know influencers that have 2,000 followers and make $1 million, right? It's just all about who is the actual, in this case, not paying customer, but it could be a paying customer, but who is the target person here? That's the only person that you should be talking to. Which is, I think, what you do, Dustin. So that's why I found you.
And I want to go on to something you just said. Chris Palermo just posted. He started posting 1 day a week. So far, he's getting as much engagement. 1 post a day. He's getting as much engagement as a McDonald's rep at a vegan convention. And I do wonder, how much engagement, Chris, are you doing on other people's content? Not only does that help the algorithm, frankly, but it also builds the relationships. I can't tell you how many people that I've engaged with that it leads to a DM, it leads to the Zoom call, it leads to them reaching out and connecting with me because we had a good back and forth. That component is probably 40% of your success on LinkedIn, and engage with other people's content. Doing your own posts is like going to the gym. Yes, you need to go to the gym and lift weights to get stronger, but you need to do rest, nutrition, diet, and hydration too. All right, so let's get off LinkedIn here, so to speak. We actually haven't even gotten a number. I think our second question in the list that we all sent each other this morning. But I'd like to actually dial into the job seeker's success. What have you actually seen? And I recognize that none of you are recruiters. I recognize that 2 of you do this voluntarily, but in the feedback that you're hearing from people organically, what are the 2 or 3 things that you're seeing that people are doing really well to stand out? We talked about the ghosting. We talked about employers kind of being difficult. What are the people doing besides networking that they're really able to stand out in the marketplace?
Ben, and share up just a couple things. And I think we've touched upon this a couple different ways. Being really succinct in your story, what value you deliver, making sure that if you need to go a step beyond, you're overtly communicative. I mean, these are some just basic things that I often tell some junior staffers. Um, uh, One thing that I have at the ready too, which sometimes helps, is I have an endorsement one pager of what others have said about me in my professional career. It mirrors the format and kind of visual nature of my resume. So it's almost like a supplement. I mean, subjectively, is it a good thing? I don't know. It does help give a little bit more dimension to a candidate. Again, I'm not job searching, but that is something that I had used in the past. Again, how others speak about you. I do think that those extra things, it helps texturize the candidate a little bit more, especially coming from a founded voice, a VP level, a director level, a president, what have you. I mean, though that is a value. And we've talked about before, I mean, are you being consistent on how you're showing up on LinkedIn? Technically, yes, if you're in an ATS tracker system, there are so many ways now. Maybe Andrea H, you can talk a little bit more about this. I mean, there's easier prompts that you can kind of retrofit, and it's not just a word dump, but making sure you're having those right keywords, that you're passing those systems, that you're taking the extra step to do the research, to find a hiring manager on LinkedIn or a connection, or you see your best friend from high school is, connected with a recruiter. Go that step, right? That's kind of where some of the value and unlock can happen. And I'll take a pause there.
Yeah, I could chime in too. I mean, what I'm hearing from people that are getting traction, is that a couple things. I think it comes down to mindset. Like this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? And searches are taking longer. And kind of mentally preparing for that, because your energy does sort of show up in the room, right? They're thinking outside the box. And I know you, Dustin, you did a session on this already, about like non-traditional paths, right? So I know of a contact who is likely finding a freelance opportunity through a parent connection through her child's school or activities. I can't remember which one. That resulted in a freelance opportunity, or considering contract work, in contract to hire. Part of it is it gets the mindset back into like you're working even to some capacity, and that energy comes forward, right? It's really hard. That's what I'm hearing. So anything that you can do for self-care, and momentum, and just keeping the mindset that this is even the job you land right now might not be your forever, and that's okay. But I think a lot of it comes down to mindset that I'm hearing of people like getting traction and momentum.
I'll just add one small thing that I see. It's a very tactical thing that I see people having success with, is being very, very clear in their LinkedIn headline. So it's no longer just like communications professional. It is, I help B2B fintech companies build media credibility before an exit, before a fundraise, whatever it might be, like something very, very specific. And that also came up recently in one of our LinkedIn calls where they were talking about like optimizing your profile and showing up as well. And amplification is that, again, that specificity around like, this is exactly what I do. This is exactly who I am.
It's a really good point. There's two things I want to bring up quickly. One is the importance of asking questions during the interview. 5 years ago, my sales mentor was teaching me how to ask questions from the Chris Voss approach. He's the guy who wrote the book on negotiation, Never Split the Difference. It's an amazing book. He used to be an FBI hostage negotiator. And with my very subtle personality, I used to tell people answers rather than ask questions. And the sales mentor took him a year to really train me on this. And I just started asking what I consider pretty standard questions, right? But recently we were in a prospect meeting, and they had talked about the prospect was talking about different challenges. I looked at the director of sales, who wasn't one of the 3 decision makers in the room, but was an influencer and was involved very involved in the challenge they're trying to overcome. And I said, well, given what we said about A, B, and C, how is that impacting the number of prospects coming in your door? And the CEO looked at me, looked at her, and mumbled, That's a really good question. I thought it was just a logical sequencing. If you ask questions, people think you're a genius. If all you do is ask intelligent questions about, okay, well, you did the thing, what does that mean over here? How have you taken that challenge and solved it in the past so I can be part of the forward-looking solution? Asking those questions. But second, ask the questions and give any answers you have dialed into the C-suite's concerns. Another show we're going to do, I think on June 10th, is why speaking C-suite should be considered a core competency factor for communicators. Because if you can ask questions that dial into their pain points, give answers that provide solutions, you can get past a ton of the we want the unicorn thing, because they it builds emotional trust, and it shows that you're dialed into their pain points. And human beings, as much as we like to pretend we're logical, are emotional creatures first.
It bridges, I think it bridges the gap too, is the only thing I'll say. You know, we've talked for, comms professionals for years have been like, how do I get a seat at the table, a seat at the table? And now with, especially with GEO, everyone's like, okay, like I'm here. This is
Right.
it. However, we see that, we experience that, we can see the impact of that. However, the executive, the company does not always connect the dots on that. I mean, how many companies are still looking to marketing to handle their GEO when we all know, right, as comms people, like this is an earned media play. This is there's still that level of communication and education that still needs to take place to bridge that gap.
And that's not going to
Totally
change.
agree. The education. I was going to say, the education, of course, these C-suites, they're brilliant. They're smart. They've been to all the best schools in the world.
Absolutely.
I do think, I have seen over many patterns and many of the same movies play out where the understanding of earned media and PR isn't quite what's in their mind. And then this resurgence, of course, with the LLMs, it makes it more valuable. So I do think, yes. So how are we as communicators translating that business impact or reputational impact, which will then impact the bottom line and business? How are we shaping that narrative in a smart way with that founded data and, quite frankly, examples? It's shifting so much. So like these examples, these real-time textures and, light background, you don't want to have them drown in examples, but just a couple key, pointed examples, texture, quick data, and the why. To your point, Dustin, how you can speak to C-suite and C-level and why it matters to them is a really important skill. Really important skill.
All right, so we got about 15 minutes left, folks. So if you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments. We're getting a lot of good comments. Please, we want to answer any precise questions you have. Leah, I do want to pivot to you. We've talked about a lot about what's happening now, but what have you seen change over the last few years, especially in return to office requirements? What have you seen in the job openings in terms of 4 years ago, 6 years ago, of course, it was everyone's remote. 4 years ago, there was a shift, but leaning toward the employee having the advantage culturally. And now it does seem like employers have a little more dominance and power in that trade. What are you seeing in terms of the job openings that you're posting in terms of return to office, hybrid, and the need to be geographically closer to an office?
Yes. So we did touch on this slightly on our pre-call, and aligned that all of us have really seen this hybrid is more so the new remote, so to speak. We're all seeing the mandates. We're all seeing, just wide sweeping policy changes. So certainly just, the hybrid is much more. I mean, I will say, of course, it's an exception, not necessarily the rule. There are still very, very strong remote roles, especially in the comms and PR space. And that, I hope, is attributed to senior leaders understanding the value of the function, and where appropriate, depending on the industry, those roles can be done anywhere, right? Again, all industry dependent, but I do want to make that asterisk caveat, but I know these ladies also, we spoke about this on the pre-call too.
Mhm. I feel like hybrid is the new remote. And that's from I've honestly been thinking about this even from my own, like the name of my company. I'm like, well, it is hybrid now too, and we've had to really add in that messaging like the last few years or so. I mean, obviously, it's interesting from my perspective when this first started, when I started remote PR jobs 8.5 years ago. Remote was like not so much a thing yet. So the roles that we were able to find that were remote, it was like gold because it was like, oh wow, like this isn't a popular thing yet, but that's what I want, right? And so I'm going to go there to find this. And so it was really like finding needles in haystacks at that point. Then, as you can imagine, during the pandemic, it quadrupled because that's all we had, right? And now we're seeing the plateau come back down to like, okay, we actually took a big dip for a while because then it was like, nope, everyone's back, right? We're doing this. And now it's kind of leveled out to what they're saying. It's like, this is the hybrid model. I think in 2022, hybrid meant like 1 day a week, right? And now we're seeing a very consistent hybrid is like 3 days a week-ish. So I think this definition really shifted without a lot of people noticing, but we're seeing it in the jobs that are coming through. And I think those that are fully remote jobs now, they're still there, but I think they're a lot more competitive. They're a little more scrutinized. Companies are asking harder questions about, time zones, availability, communication habits. So
Yeah.
yes, I think we can all go on record saying hybrid is the new remote.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and Leah, I know you've noted this too. You really need to read the job description. So hybrid means different things to different companies. Most of the time, they're pretty clear in the job description. I mean, hybrid can mean 1 day remote. I've seen it as many as 4 days in the office. Second, I'm also, when I see remote roles, I'm seeing a growing trend of stating specific states. I've seen states excluded, or zones excluded, or I've seen preferences for time zones too. So again, I think I think the level of specificity in the job descriptions has increased. So I would say read the job description very closely. That would be my advice.
And I will say alternatively, when I don't know, Andrea, if you've caught this, the job description is clear. Let's just say East Coast preferred, East Coast time zone, or I've seen, this is an in-office role in X city, X state. And then you see comments. Would you be open to remote? Well,
Oh my
no,
gosh,
like that's literally,
Yeah.
and that's so when you say that, Andrea, I've also seen the flip side, right? And I don't think they're bots. I think that they are real humans
Yeah.
commenting. I have noticed some of that too. So take that as you will if folks aren't reading. I don't know.
So I'm going to break my 2-second rule, which is where our answer. I'm supposed to be quiet for 2 seconds because they're a lot more interesting than I am. So Leah, you raise a good point, and I want to bring this back to the post that you shared 40 minutes ago. There's a lot of overwhelm with employers. Brooke and Jessica shared that with AI now, there can be 1,000 resumes, and that's why that networking we talked about earlier is so important. But I wonder when people are asking those questions or they're applying for jobs, and I'm part of a group that the owner of the group said, people stop applying for these jobs and these opportunities when you're not qualified. You haven't met these 3 specifications on the job listing. How much do you think that hurts the function? But also, how much does that hurt other people looking for work to where maybe they can't get to the best candidates because they're going through the process? And how much do you think that impacts having a job still open 3 months later, 6 months later? Or do you think that those 2 things are disconnected? Because to me, I wonder if they're impacting the employer equation.
I do think, just in transparency, that it's certainly a more recruiter question, because you do see recruiters who say, hey, if you are 80% of the way of let's just say 80, you have 80% of the job description, go for it. I see that very often, right? You don't want to take yourself out of something when you're really close, or maybe you didn't play something up that you should have in your resume, and then you get to the interview and the hiring manager loves it, right? So you don't want to take yourself out of it. So I do want to be really careful there. Again, I'm not a recruiter, but I have anecdotally seen yes, if it's a sales job and you are an engineer and you're applying, like
Right.
it
Yes.
yes, you're gonna foreseeably kind of muck up the volume. But when we see over 100 people have applied for this role on LinkedIn, you do have to. The reality is, many of those are not qualified candidates, and their resume probably isn't tailored for that job, or they don't have that experience. So I know I just talked about a bunch of different things here, but from a recruiter standpoint, I do see recruiters encouraging folks that, again, roughly 80% of the qualifications to go ahead and go for it.
All right, so we're going to close with two things. One, briefly, I want to address something Trishanda asked, and then we're going to wrap up. I know we started a few minutes late, folks, so thank you for your patience with the technical snafu on my end. Trishanda asked, when there's skills you'd like to gain outside of your full-time role, how do you recommend pitching yourself for freelance opportunity to learn these things? This isn't simply building your network and having a networking coffee for the thing you want to learn. And I'll go to something Brooke and Jessica said 2 weeks ago, which is first, don't try to go too far outside your lane. Now, your lane can be internal comms, it could be PR, but it could also be heavily regulated industries in executive communication. So stay within your lane, but make sure you define your lane very carefully. And then second, I would always argue that if you're currently employed, do try to get that networking. See if there's enough overlap that you can make the transition, and you'll find a freelance opportunity. Get at least 1 or 2 projects under your belt. If you're not employed, I would strongly encourage you to stay in that 80 to 85% lane that Leah just talked about, because an inch wide and a mile deep is going to be a whole lot better than going the other way and flailing for the next 5 months or 5 years.
I have a couple thoughts. I do think, again, this is a hard market for pivots, right? So that kind of mirrors what you just said. I do think, though, there's opportunities to build skills like outside your skill set through things like volunteering. Like I know IABC comes to mind as a professional organization that is always looking for volunteers, right, to help run events or, and I think there's probably opportunities that if you want to build your skill set in a particular area, helping a professional organization with that skill set is, I think, a great way, low risk, to have like something you can point to and demonstrate. I also think with Gen AI tools, there's a lot of ways that you can take on a personal project and demonstrate that skill set, whether it's writing or vibe coding or what have you. I think building maybe some examples would be, but I think volunteering, taking on passion projects might be ways that you could get some artifacts if you are trying to make a slight pivot. But Leah and Andrea, I'm curious what your thoughts.
Just a quick one. I think it's also just like being super clear and identifying your transferable skills. I think we did an article about this on remote PR jobs recently, and it was like identifying like, here are my transferable skills and how they can play here. Because you can want to make a pivot all day long and understand why you think you would be very good at this pivot, right? But again, it's kind of like the PR executive, like counseling the executive, right? It's like they have to understand what the value is for them. So I think just going through what you're currently doing and identifying what is transferable and how it can be a benefit is one thing. And then also just like there's so many different online courses right now. Like I know for myself, like I'm investing in a lot of like different types of AI courses right now. Why? Because I know that it's important. I know it's not going anywhere. I know it can benefit my business. I just want to understand what's at the forefront. So AI courses, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, Coursera. I mean, there's so many resources out there just to actively show what you're doing as well.
And it helps show that initiative, right? That you're taking those, you have those receipts, you're taking those steps, right? Free. I think there was even an article, some Harvard online courses are free now, right? Those certificates, there's some that just went over to free. Yes, it's time and your hours, but it's an upside signal, right? Of initiative.
And then we'll close on this question. What's the one piece of advice you'd give someone starting a job search tomorrow? And I'll lead with, I would say, focus all of your communication effort on your target audience. Don't try to get an op-ed. No offense to PR Daily. I love Allison. She's published me a lot. But if you're looking for a job in the Bay Area, target Bay Area media. If you're looking for the construction industry, there's a ton of PR people in PR Daily. So we know PR people getting published in Construction Mag monthly. So make sure whatever you're doing on LinkedIn, in your networking, or in your independent, thought leadership, that you are targeting your target audience in a very concrete way that always focus on their pain points, the unique solutions that you offer, and it speaks their language.
My advice is just to be human. I know that sounds so cliche and so silly, but like, sure, use AI for your research, not for your writing. I think it's great to understand a company's position and prep yourself, but like, just be a human. To your point, ask questions. It sounds like the simplest, most obvious thing, and I would say 85% of people do not do it, and it really stand out.
I'll say, again, if I was back to square one, a basic of write down your 20 former colleagues, friends, and the number can be 10, it could be 20, it could be 50, and truly set time with them, right? Don't get frustrated if they can't meet in the next week, right? You're on their timetable. They are doing you kind of they're carving time to ultimately help you, as they should want to, right? If they are in your close circle and they are in your close network, and ask who they could introduce you to, or, is there anyone that I should speak with? I'm happy to reach out, and make it easy for them. Make it easy for them. If you're asking them to do something, this is who I am. This is a link to my LinkedIn. This is what I do. This is what I'm looking for. And, hopefully that generosity will kind of yield in spades. But I would start with, your true core confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I love both those points. I would add that when you are connecting with your network, one of the key questions I think you should lead with is, what would you do if you were in my shoes with my search? Like, who would you reach out to, or what companies would you target? Because I think that will open up some goal, some goodness, and maybe an insight that you didn't have. And finally, just give yourself grace and don't feel like you're alone in this, would be my advice.
The last thing I just want to tag on, because is people want to help. Like everyone, people want to help, but it's a lot easier when you tell somebody exactly what you need versus like, can I just pick your brain? Can I have 30 minutes of your time? Like that, to me, like if you tell me like specifically how I can help you and what you're looking for and make it easy for me, like I'll go over the moon for you. Right. And so I think, to your point of like making it easy and like being very specific in your ask, I think people are uncomfortable to ask, but like make the ask, because people do want to help.
And I'll actually add something from what Leah said earlier. With the exception of the kinds of people who ghost or make you do 9 rounds of interviews, most executives are experts in the function that they started the company in, or they were brought to be leadership. My business partner, I call him Dad, or my kids call him Grandpa. He has started 5 companies. He's taken 2 of them multi-millions of dollars. He's a marketing guy. They have 6,000 customers on Cape Cod alone, and for his main company. And people call him all the time, wanting to get marketing advice. And when he tells them it's going to take 6 months and cost a certain amount of money, they get shocked by this idea. Most executives are marketing ignorant, communications ignorant. They will always see communications as a nice to have. So I want to make sure that when you go to these interviews, you don't walk in with a combative or a giving up attitude. Walk in with saying, they might have this bias. Let me ask the questions to uncover their key points. And to something that was said by somebody in the comments, look, there's an iceberg here. Okay, they are hiring for this role, for this need that they say they have. Let's ask the questions. Let's speak to their pain points, find those unique solutions. And that can only be done by having as much of a positive attitude as possible and charitable attitude for the person you're interviewing with. So, Leah, Andreas, this was great. Sorry we ran long and started late, but this was so much fun. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks for having us.
Everybody.